Yeah, we've been talking a lot this week about the long game, emphasizing the long game, and I think it comes down to, are we going to prioritize experiences or culture? And to me, culture is something that has been really evasive in my life. There's the culture that I was spoon-fed when I was growing up. There's the culture that I elected and chose for myself. And I think when we're really talking about the types of men that we're inviting into our community and the men we really want to be a part of Rising Man moving forward, the shoulders that we're asking for her so that the next generation of Rising Men can stand upon are men who really are hungry for culture and know how to be stewards of culture. All right, welcome back to the Rising Man podcast. Here we are on site again in the beautiful outskirts of Death Valley, here with the illustrious Shawn once again, Desert Diaries Part 2, and also with two of our esteemed apprentices. To my left, Eric Ely-Blaise and Sir Ryan Wilcox, right there. Wanted to take an opportunity to catch this opportunity to have a conversation with you guys, men who have been a part of the Rising Man journey for a long time, men who came into the Rising Man movement without much pretext or much of a sense of what it means to lead other men. And so I guess just for starters, I'd like to hear from each one of you guys. What did you think Brotherhood was before you became a member of the Rising Man movement? Why don't you go ahead first, Ryan?
I don't know that I have like a definition of that in my mind, but if I'm to draw myself backwards a few years, what I think about Brotherhood, I think about like other guys that are interested in the same kind of like fun things that I am interested in, and just like that like jovial camaraderie of like, all right, we all go surf together, then drink together and talk about women, those kinds of things. So nothing really solid.
What about you, Eric?
Yeah, I can definitely echo what Ryan was saying. And just thinking about, like, for me, it was like Brotherhood it was just like men that were there to have my back, call me out on my bullshit, men to, pick me up when I'm down.
And so, Ryan, you got involved with Rising Man back in 2019, and Eric, not too long before that. What would you guys say has been the biggest change to that definition of Brotherhood, and I guess just being a part of a community of men since that time up until now, 3 years later?
Everything. Yeah, Brotherhood to me now is like almost the vibe that the word takes on is like Knights of the Round Table kind of a feel. Kind of like the Spartans, like someone I consider to be my brother is someone who I consider has my back, has my best interest at heart, even if I don't in that moment. They're willing to pull me aside and be like, hey, dude, what's up? Why are you doing these things the way that you're doing them now? And then the original definition I just gave still stands, but it has like a much more of a deepening and a trust to it when that element is involved, when I can truly trust the man in front of me to hold me to my highest standard, even when I'm not willing to be there myself.
Yeah. So it's similar to what I was saying before, but now it's an even higher standard. Instead of just being able to call a man and be like, hey, I need help, I get the call and say, how you doing? Right? And they're men that I can learn from, men that I can teach. It's just this greater sense of camaraderie opposed to just like bros, you know, guys that I can go do things with, like, you know, drink or talk about women, but more about just the idea of where are you going? What are you doing? How are you doing it? When are you going to do it by? Right? More detail into the support instead of just being like, good job. But like, are you continuing to move the needle?
So we were just having a conversation for a while about ultimately what we want this organization to look like from the top down. We're talking about having people in your life that, you know, you can really count on, and what it takes to create a culture like that. And essentially we're creating something that I don't think any of us have ever really seen or experienced before. I know I feel like I've been fortunate myself to have relationships like that for the better part of my life. But how do we really create this in a way that men can understand, men can connect to? Because there's so much that we got to fracture and break away from. There's so much conditioning and programming and ideas of what being a man or being in a relationship with other men actually looks like. So when I hear what you guys are talking about as your reference for what you came into this community with and what you're experiencing here now, I'm just thinking of what does it really take to communicate that to guys who are taking their first step into Rising Man, this is the first episode of the podcast that they're ever listening to. How do we paint that picture? You know, that's the question I'm always asking myself.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's the difference between, you know, reading a book or hearing information and being present to someone who's embodying it and getting all the subtext that's communicated through just proximity to, you know, aliveness and personhood, as opposed to just what's in text or, you know, in a voice. And I think so much of our culture in general is oriented to that of just, you know, prioritizing the efficiency of information, moving information around, as opposed to the priority of embodiment, embodying information, which essentially becomes wisdom over time. You know, it's like you can watch all the videos you want about, you know, how to do a martial arts, but until you're actually on the mat with someone who's embodied the mastery of a martial art, there's all just the nuances that you just can't get from watching a 2D screen or hearing someone's voice in your head. And I think in the same way that we're trying to create leadership programs that require, you know, long-term participation, so that there's just a direct transmission of a very, you know, something that has like a lot of fidelity and integrity that gets handed down, and not something that's a flavor of a flavor of a flavor, you know. Because I think a lot of the work we're doing, especially with Compass and stuff, it is this order of transformation. Like we're literally asking men to go out there and stop being who they are. You know, that's huge. That's a huge ask. That's essentially what we're doing. You know, ritual death. Go out there and die. Let everything you've considered valuable and important to yourself and who you're about, to go out there to the desert or the woods or the forest or wherever, and say goodbye to that man. And that's huge. I don't really think you can get I don't really think a man can, or, you know, women too are doing this work as well, but I just don't think that's, you know, we were talking about this earlier, this idea of, what was it that book you were reading was saying about people hanging out in the liminal state, and, you know.
Yeah, talking about the
It was something about consciousness, state of consciousness. Well, I guess we'll just use our own language, right? So in a rite of passage, there's severance, which is the process of, you know, doing taking inventory of who you are, getting clear on what you've been about, then getting prepared to let that identity die, and then going out to a threshold experience, which is what, you know, the men out in the hills behind us are doing right now. 4 days and 4 nights, no food, just water by themselves on their own, which is, you know, what is often called the ordeal or the high, like oh shit, this is what it's really about, here we go. And then coming out of there with this new vision of who you're going to be and what you're about and how you're going to approach the world as that new man with those new ideals, those new values, and that really not happening a lot in our world. So we were talking about like, you know, the festival circuit and weekend workshops and
Plant medicine ceremonies.
Yeah, plant ceremonies, and it's like you can just kind of go from experiencing these, you know, threshold experiences to threshold experiences to threshold experiences, and not really take the time or know that there should be time taken to fully digest those experiences and incorporate the knowledge and the wisdom that you've gained, and have the support of a community to help you start to live out your day-to-day life with those new realizations. So yeah, and again, just coming back to, I think it's great that there's so much out there on offer. So this isn't talking down to anyone who's out there putting a program out there that's geared to help people transform into higher states of themselves. It's really just noticing that culturally, because we are such a transient, busy, fast-paced, separated culture, it's really hard to create value and space for people to take the time that it really takes to embody that newfound wisdom or that newfound paradigm, and to start peering into your life through that new vision, and take the baby steps that it takes over time. Just like a toddler, like you need people to hold your hands on those first few steps just to get the feel. Because if you don't, and you know, I think people fall and get hurt like a baby hitting their head in a corner of a table when they fall. You know, it's like it sets you back, and you're less likely to get up and start doing it again because it's painful.
Yeah, that really reminds me, thank Ted for bringing that book Mastery around, because the experiences that we, as we'll just say civilization, are used to having is like climax after climax after climax. And I'm beginning to understand more and more for myself that it's really about like mastery, and that involves a lot of big growth and then a plateau of nothingness for a while. And it's not like nothing is happening in that nothingness, but unless we're able to hold that and lose a little bit of growth for a second and come back to it and hold that desire to be in the process before we can hit another point of what we'll call rapid growth in the moment, then yeah, if we're stuck in that instant gratification phase that is so prominent in Western civilization, then we will just go from experience to experience, never digesting what we get, like you said.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot this week about the long game, you know, emphasizing the long game, and I think it comes down to, are we going to prioritize experiences or culture? And to me, culture is something that has been really evasive in my life. There's the culture that I was spoon-fed when I was growing up. There's the culture that I elected and chose for myself. And I think when we're really talking about the types of men that we're inviting into our community and the men we really want to be a part of Rising Man moving forward, you know, the shoulders that we're asking for her so that the next generation of Rising Men can stand upon are men who really are hungry for culture and know how to be stewards of culture, because experiences come and go. And just like you were saying in that book Mastery by George Leonard, those experiences are fleeting, and they're not, they don't stick around. Everybody knows what that feels like. Just the other day when Shawn and I were recording our episode, we were talking about vacations. You know, people often, they go on vacations and they have this expectation of what they're going to experience, and then the experience is over, and then there's the, well, now what? Because you can't hold on to an experience. You can't hold on to a moment. Life is about building upon one experience to the next, to the next, to the next. So I really want to echo what you were saying, Shawn. I think that it's valuable that there's a lot of opportunities for people to go and have transformational experiences. But what does it look like to actually transform a self? And then to go beyond transforming a self, but transforming an entire community. You know, that word personal development is a buzzword, right? Everyone's talking about personal development, personal growth. But I'm much more interested in collective development. What does it look like for us as a collective to develop ourselves, to really transform what society looks like for us, and doing so in small ways first, you know, reducing it down to small component parts and disseminating that through these smaller circles.
It reminds me of the saying that the era of the lone wolf is over. And I've heard a lot of people say that before, and even still living in a lone wolf kind of a way. Like, I can't even say for myself that I'm fully in a tribal community, whatever, a conglomerate of humans kind of being. For the most part, I'm looking for the skin on my own back. And I'm speculating here, but I don't know that until we can move to a place where we have our individuality, but each one of us is looking out for each other's interests like we are one living organism, it's going to be near impossible to spread that further and further to encompass the world that we live on.
Yeah, it's good. That actually makes me have a question for you guys. So having, seen an organization like Rising Man out there and then feel the pull to participate with the programs and then feel the pull to become part of, a training, and, both of you guys are showing up a lot of different ways. What are you seeing? What is it that you guys are seeing that kind of speaks to that, piece of like, hey, maybe this is a opportunity to build upon that concept of we're doing it with each other, for each other. What was you saying? What was the value, the standard, or the from your perspective, what was the draw?
The draw for me was understanding and learning leadership and how to be able to embody who I really wanted to be, and recognizing that it wasn't just for me. It was the impact that I have on the people that I interact with the most, and even people that I don't interact with very often. But being able to show up into a room with a whole bunch of strangers, and people seeing that, like, oh, hey, his embodiment is really just, really, it's gravitational, right? And wanting to understand how to be more like that. I couldn't really explain how to be that way, just knowing that, like, through Rising Man and through the programs and being exposed to other men that are embodying their values and their leadership, it's just like, it just starts to happen more and more, because you see the value that these people bring to certain places and experiences that we're having. So it's like the experience, yeah, so like Jeddy was saying, you can have experience after experience, but it's fleeting. But when you integrate what you're learning from those experiences into your embodiment, it just becomes almost, I wouldn't call it addictive, but it's like, it's just this thing that you want to see more of, and you want to see those that you love be able to express themselves that way as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I gotta say, a series of fortunate events. Back to what we were just talking about with the instant gratification mindset. Like, I was going from experience to experience in some degree and manner, and it took other people recognizing something in me to offer something up to me that would help me move along the path. I was in a place where I really didn't want to be, and I was really uncomfortable in that place. I knew that if I continued down that road, it was just going to lead me to, I don't know, a dead end or a place of depression that I've been in before. And you calling me and being like, hey, there's this thing called Compass, and Mark Rose offering me to be in the fire circles to forward my growth in that way, and then continuous opportunities for leadership, that the willingness that I had to say yes was a huge part of that. And I don't know that I would have purposefully carved that space out for myself if it wasn't offered by people who saw something in me, who were willing to take a chance on me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me think of this article I reference all the time. I know I've definitely talked about it on podcast episodes before, but it takes an extended look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People who aren't familiar with Maslow, they can go and look it up. Just the hierarchy of needs that identifies what motivates people, essentially, is what his research was, is what motivates people to take action to do certain things. And starting at the bottom of the pyramid, food, sleep, warmth, the basic needs, moving up the ladder through the different, not just physiological needs, but then emotional needs that we have, needs for belonging, needs to be acknowledged, ultimately resulting in a self-actualized person. And to me, I always looked at that pyramid as just the beginning. The thing that so many of us didn't receive, moving from childhood through adolescence and into adulthood, is we never really got to self-actualization, because a financial need wasn't met, a physiological need wasn't met, an emotional need wasn't met. So I think what a lot of the personal development world, especially in the realm of men's work, is doing is we're in sometimes very clumsy ways trying to figure out how to establish these baseline needs for ourselves so we can actually be self-actualized people, which I ultimately interpret through our language as having a gift to give back to the community. But as we know, that's just the beginning, right? In the model of a rite of passage, incorporating that gift and having something to give back is really what it's all about. So this new model of Maslow's hierarchy takes self-actualization and transports it into another pyramid that goes from self-actualization to community actualization to cultural perpetuity, where we create a whole community of self-actualized peoples. When you have everybody activated and fully implementing their gift, you have a well-oiled machine. Mm-hmm. It's like a whole nother organism. So I think of just one self-actualized person in the world who has all of their fundamental needs met because of the support of the community and the family that helped raise them. And then moving that forward to a whole circle of community actualized people, a whole community that's actualized because we're all self-actualized peoples. And now we have something that we can hand off to the next generation. Mm-hmm. And so I think when I really reflect on what we're doing here, because we're still figuring this out as we go too. What does it look like to create a community that can usher men to that threshold and help them get to that place of self-actualization, so that gift that they have to give is fully primed and ready to be delivered. And then that becomes a greater part of this organism of actualized peoples and what's possible then. I don't know if we've ever really seen that. I know I've never seen that. I've never seen an entire community or family of actualized peoples who are fully in their gifts, who are giving back entirely what they have. And that's what I'd like to see. That's what I'd really like to see us create. I think we're on our way to doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was the big draw for me too. It was just finding my own self-actualization, seeing others like Jeddy and Shawn and Ryan and being like, that's a level that I'd like to reach as well. And I'm not going to be able to do that by myself in the lone wolf world, but through community and support,
I think
Yeah, go ahead.
To back to your other question, the willingness that I had and the reason why I was so willing to say yes and things like that is because of exactly what Eric was saying. The people who were offering me to learn and grow from were people who I trusted and people who I aspired to be like in some reason or another. So, because you know, a lot of people are willing to give opportunity, but unless they're embodying the thing that they're preaching, it's almost like a hollow offer in my heart, I guess. So to really see the way that you guys live your lives outside of the container that is the Rising Man movement is a massive draw for me.
Yeah, well, that leads up to something we were talking about a little bit, just leading into this conversation too, which was, looking at the way Western civilization tends to run businesses or tends to run organizations and all these models out there about what makes them successful, and looking at what's happening in Rising Man and trying to see if there's a way to identify, we talk about the long game, right? And looking at ways to identify what makes the long game valuable. I would say it's the longest game, right? What makes the longest game valuable other than the potential for financial success or power or all these things that tend to come, the promises that tend to come with, committing a large part of one's life to pursuing something, which is usually involving giving over a lot of your stuff. Like, hey, make this sacrifice of your time and energy and creativity, and you'll be rewarded with these things. And what we are really have been talking about is, hey, we're creating a space where people can get in touch with what their gift is. When I say gift, I'm really thinking about, like, how is it, we all have these human attributes, being loving, being kind, being curious, being strong, being a good listener, being compassionate, right? All these kind of aspects that humans can show up with for each other. And for me, the gift is learning how to identify what your wheelhouse is. Everyone's going to be able to identify a handful of those gifts that they really excel at, or that they desire to excel at. And what's required is having opportunities and experiences to bring those out, right? To cultivate them and to embody them and to feel that the confidence that comes with knowing how to identify situations and circumstances where you can bring that out to, of yourself as a gift, not as something you have to give over and then be rewarded for. Like, the reward comes from getting to show up as that person you truly desire to be, because we've created contexts and opportunities for people to do that. Setting the stage, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a great drummer, it's like we want to create an opportunity for that person to get to play the drums, and people can witness and receive the beauty of, like, wow, it's amazing what this person can do with the drums, and I think that's a nuance of what we're talking about is, getting back to what you're saying, Jeddy, about Maslow's and the community actualization. And to me, it's like there's a little bit of a mystery of going back and looking at where did we lose that? Because obviously there was a time, and going back to a certain era where community actualization was the thing in our sort of tribal lineages we all come from, where we were just a singular people and everyone had a role and their role was viable and they understood the importance of the role and they were acknowledged for their role. And if you didn't do your role, it could really hurt a lot of people. It was obvious. The tangibility was very visceral. And then coming into the more modern times with our technology and the way people can move around the world and all the things we kind of get involved with, we've sort of lost that value. And I think primarily because we don't have to do that anymore. No one's obligated. Like, half of us probably couldn't even really identify, like, who our community is, let alone, show up for them in a tangible way. Like, most of us are going to jobs and doing work that offers absolutely nothing to the person, that we care about the most. It's like, if I work at a software company and I'm programming software for a game, like, that does nothing for the people I truly want to support and love. They don't value my programming skills, right? There's a conversion thing with money that becomes the value. And I think that's sort of where the separation is can we get back to a place where who I am and my beingness and my passions of how I am just as a human become tangible again as an offering, as a gift to the people I truly care about and the community I want to be a part of for whatever they're holding.
Yeah.
Well, there's actually some fundamental obstacles and barriers that have been introduced by civilization. I just started rereading *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari, and what he was talking about is we accidentally made our lives more complex and more difficult by introducing systems of agriculture and systems of economy, because on a very basic level, it made it easier for us to have more children. It made it easier for our lives to become bigger than when we were just simple hunter-gatherers and foragers. And we thought if I can just grow my food here instead of having to go chase it all day long, my life will get easier. I won't have to work as hard. I won't have to worry about feeding my kids. This is literally what our ancestors did about 10,000 years ago. But we accidentally initiated this cycle that is really hard to reverse. In fact, it might be impossible to reverse at this point because what happens is after a few generations of that, we don't even remember what it was like to have a less complex lifestyle, where we had more times to prioritize relationships, where we had more times to reflect on who I am as an individual and even have space for that mentorship, right? I mean, now we literally have things called retreats. We have to retreat from our lives to go and discover who we are. And that's so incongruent with the normal development of humans. And I know you speak to this a lot about just the time span of how long we've been doing humanity this way versus the greater time spectrum of things. So when we come out here and we have experiences like this, and men like you guys come into this community and we have these moments of connection, and we're out here in the middle of nowhere and it's so quiet and things just make sense out here. Just a conversation you and I were having last night under the stars late at night. We're just like, it's so easy to connect the dots out here because we're living more on this timeline in this context versus where this complexity that doesn't really make sense with how we're biologically engineered.
Like I'm hearing the connection between what Shawn was just saying and what you were saying, Jeddy, is like, we're out here and I'm this software engineer and I'm doing all this thing and it really has no effect or there's no benefit to the people that I love the most, except for the paycheck so I can go buy the food, which I'm completely disconnected from now because it's just so convenient for me to go here. But we're losing that time to spend with those people and building those connections. It's like I come home from working 8-12 hours designing software and my children want to have fun or my spouse wants to spend some quality time with me and I'm exhausted. I just need to eat and take a shower and get caught up on something that I have to deal with at work tomorrow. And that we're just like fully disconnected. And then, my spouse is doing a similar thing with whatever her day is filled with. And then she comes home and all she's trying to do is take care of the child, but she still has to cook and clean and do all these things that, society is calling like important, right? And I mean, those things, need to be done, but now there's no time, right? It's like all these hours in our days are just like being pulled away from us because society has created this paradigm of like, work and creating things for other people that we'll never be connected to.
Say, Eric, where did you find that spouse? I mean, she works, she cooks, she cleans, she takes care of the kids. I got to find me one of those.
I don't know, man. I manifested her.
But there's something to be said to all of that. And what you're mentioning, Jeddy, about it's easier to connect the dots when we're out here. Something that I'm discovering for myself is that coming back to the time of nature, nature has its own rhythms and timing that the intellect of the human mind, we're so capable of moving like that to almost to our bane, right? Like we're on to the next thing, creating. And our bodies, in my opinion, actually literally can't move at that rate. Their illnesses come out. Like, how many people do you know that are burnt out because of the things that they're doing on a day-to-day level? And then when I step back and remove myself from that kind of a lifestyle, which thankfully I've been grateful and blessed to be able to do that for a long period of time, and really just slow down the pace in which I live my life, somehow I feel like quantum leaps. I feel like I'm moving like lightning with the things that I actually want to move my life forward with, compared to having all these tentacles out in different directions, all these things that need to get done in order for my day to feel good and complete and take care of the bosses, this and that. And when I'm in a container like this, out in the natural world, everything just kind of melts away. You know, back when foraging and hunting was the thing, it's not like how land is today, where you had to go hours and hours and hours to hunt for something and actually maybe get one thing, maybe not. Like, I believe that the land was much more abundant. One, because we stewarded it in that way, and two, because we just knew how to look and where to navigate to find those kinds of things. Like, it would be hard-pressed to believe that people were living where we are right now in an abundant lifestyle without water, without natural resources to sustain that. But that's coming a little bit away from the nature time.
Yeah.
Well, I think what people are ultimately trying to do is we're all just trying to figure it out. We're all just trying to figure out how to make life work for ourselves. And if we could all just achieve that, if we all could just snap our fingers and have all of our basic needs met, I think that we'd ultimately just fall back into service. That's what I believe is in the hearts of all men, is that we all just deeply want to be of service. We all want to be valuable to our community and want to be able to give back. And over the grand scheme of the history of humans, it's looked like a lot of different ways, but at the core level, it's always been about providing for my family, taking care of the people that I love, and finding a way to set up the next generation as best that I can. So when I extrapolate that formula and I apply it to the guy who's working at a tech job right now, who's, you know, maybe at a tech startup, they're working 60 to 80 hours a week. They're focused on financial goals and trying to pay mortgages and all of the different check boxes that we have. How much of that is actually reflective of how that man wants to be of service on this planet, versus just, this is the best way I can find right now to solve this puzzle. And I get it, you know. It's not to diminish what people are out there doing and how they're trying to figure out their lives, because who am I to know what anyone should be doing? But I believe that a lot of what you were saying before about just the illness, just like the illness of society, is because there's so much disconnection from how our bodies are engineered to be used and implemented and how we're actually using them. And going back to the mission in Rising Man, you know, our mission is to initiate an entire generation of men into purpose-driven leadership. And that last part, that purpose-driven leadership part, represents exactly what we're talking about here. And it looks differently for each one of us. Even the four of us right here, we're all part of the Rising Man leadership team, and every single one of us has a different version of what purpose-driven leadership looks like for us. But the ways in which we're communicating and articulating our leadership is connected to a unique purpose that we each have. So really, when it comes down to it, that's what we're guiding men towards, is identifying what that purpose is. And maybe you still have to work a 9-to-5 job to figure out how to express that unique purpose, but not just accepting that this is the way that it has to be, that I must be stuck in this way of living because it's what I was given. You know?
The imagery that I have in my mind is like a caterpillar, right? Caterpillar's just going about doing its thing, eating grass, well, whatever it eats. And there becomes a point, I don't know what it feels, but for me, it's that uncomfortability that starts to come up inside of me. And if I'm stuck in this place and I'm sitting in that uncomfortability, I'm going to die a caterpillar. But if I'm willing to go through that transformation and mush myself into some sort of weird gel that's inside of a cocoon, then I can emerge out the butterfly. But the caterpillar also doesn't know that it's going to turn into a butterfly. It just knows that what it's currently doing isn't working anymore, and it's got to metamorphosize.
Yeah, well, that makes me think too, just within the message of Rising Man is, how would I say it? Like purpose driven, but also looking at, we've talked about this before in different levels of, are we putting, like for instance, I said this the other day, like if I knew someone came out to do Compass and they were re-identifying as a new, they were going to become a new oil tycoon, like I see myself, I mean, they may have all the rights, values and standards about what that gift would be to the world, what it provides for people. But there's a fundamental paradigm there that I can't get behind anymore, because I know that down the long road it's going to be harmful overall. And so when I think about the purpose-driven, leadership with Rising Man, it is we are trying to cultivate an awareness in every man. I don't know if I'd say it's responsibility. In a sense it is, but I mean, we have to build a new earth. This might be a little bit off of our topic, but I think it's relevant to say that if we look at the way the things we've made important and valuable, and especially in Western civilization, all the things we kind of hold up as like the things we want to achieve, and people have been achieving them for many, many decades now. And if we look around at the cost of the number of people that have been able to achieve a certain lifestyle, it's not pretty. The cost, whether it's climate change or pollution or waste and inefficiencies and marginalization and poverty and all the, mental illness and all the stuff that is extremely pronounced compared to just 500 years ago, compared to just 5,000 years ago. We don't really have, you think about with kids having ADHD and being on medication at early ages, and it's stuff that I feel like is all these indicators of, it's great to want to experience success and all the things that come with it as far as like living the life we want to live. I just feel like going forward into the future, we need men who are going to, whatever group of men, I think about the founding fathers, right? The guys sitting around the kind of Constitution and the vision they had, it was just a handful of men, right? And it was flawed. It was a very flawed idea. But nonetheless, they rallied around a vision and they had enough volition to actually create a nation. I mean, that's powerful. That's amazing that a handful of men could do that. And to me, it's the same thing that, okay, yeah, it was flawed, and all those flaws have become we see now the flaws are in full flourish in our societies. And what group of men is it going to take now to re-envision how to correct those flaws, how to improve and better upon, what does it mean to be to have, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or whatever it is that is going to create even a higher level of equanimity, a higher level of equality, a higher level of brotherhood and, community and nationhood, for lack of a better word. So to me, I feel like that's the kind of people I want to be around, is people who are able to actually face the fact that the systems we've been living on are not going to cut it going forward. They're not, and there's a bunch of us, myself included, who are going to have to be willing to say, I'll be one of the first ones to stop pursuing that dream, and I'm willing to make the sacrifices to be uncomfortable relative to the society around me that is saying this is what comfortable should be, and to start cultivating a repository of men, a community where other men can come into who are disillusioned or seeing the dissatisfaction, or who are aware that the pursuits they are already on are not good. Not to qualify it, and they need to come into a place where there's enough men around who are holding a picture of a different way to do things that becomes reinforced, because we're looking at each other, we're holding each other in that accountability, we're holding each other in the value, we're creating a new value amongst ourselves and saying we want to do it this way.
Yeah, that just reminds me of there's the process of severance. You know, speaking of compass, speaking of any rite of passage, the shattering and the committing to death and identity can be such a vulnerable and scary process. And so for anyone who's created a whole career or a whole livelihood, a way of providing for a family, a way of creating generational wealth and legacy for their children, to release that without knowing what's next is a very scary thing. And so imagining a new earth, imagining a new possibility, for myself is often trying to just tap into the compassion and empathize with what that experience must be like, to release that, to release an idea of how I was going to live the rest of my life. So if I was somebody who owned an oil company, and even trying to begin to imagine letting go of that in exchange for something else, it's massive. And so just figuring out how do we, because it's really no different than what we're doing here. We're just creating a space and a context for someone to release their whole identity and be in that interstitial space of floating and not knowing where one might land, but knowing that there is a landing space on the other side of that threshold.
Yeah.
And when you were talking, Shawn, it was making me think that, perhaps there's a greater specification that we get to put into our mission statement, because initiating an entire generation of men to be purpose-driven leaders and stewards of a new earth is really what we've been talking about from the beginning. And it's really what we've been looking for. It's the type of men we've been recruiting into our space. And, so far we haven't had any oil tycoons or folks of that persuasion in our community yet, but I do think that it's a great opportunity to be even more specific about that and to set that bar and that standard higher for all of us. Because I know there's still plenty of room for me to be even more of a purpose-driven leader, to be an even better steward of the new earth, and to just really plant that flag in the ground, declare that.
There's something in there. I'm glad you tied it back to the rites of passage work. I don't know if this is a magic pill, but in my mind, like, I trust that being out here for these men will bring them to a vision that leads them to that, what we're calling at this point a new earth, right? Like nature-based initiatory rites of passage, bringing, we're just setting a container and bringing people out in a safe way to come and explore the greatest teacher that exists, in my opinion. And my trust is that whatever they find out there is the right thing for them.
Yeah. I agreed.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, Eric?
I just, thinking about, this severance phase that you're talking about, and how it's severance and redefining identity. There's this like attachment that society is really pushing for, what success and abundance really looks like. But I think the truth of success and abundance is, that a being of service, right? And these things that we can create are energies that we get to share, right? It's like it's what empowers the community, not just myself, right? We're looking at individuals who are successful and full of abundance, and they're empowering themselves, but that doesn't do any good for their community. But when we sever from that identity and we release that attachment, that just opens up more possibilities. And like Ryan was saying, our greatest teacher, nature, when you look out into nature, the possibilities are endless. It's so open and so vast that anything is possible, right? I mean, thinking about societies thousands of years ago that didn't have the technologies that we had, that knew so much about the stars. And to them, that was like this level of abundance that we have no idea about. Like, we don't understand that because like space is abundant. And so like I just that's what I think about.
Well, I just want to touch on this really quick because it's just come to my awareness that we're speaking in some ways to an audience. We're having a conversation between us right now, but just that aspect of coming out into nature, it doesn't have to be a big grand gesture. It doesn't have to be that initiatory rite of passage. Yes, being held in that container, I think, is the best way to advance myself, one's self, through a process of growth. But if you're listening to this and you don't know where to start, I think that the best advice that I could give is just find some time in solitude in nature and listen and observe and see what comes to you.
And buckle up, because it's really it's the long game that we're talking about here. You know, we talk about the long game, we talk about the slow burn. If there's one thing that I can really communicate in that same vein, it's that there is no quick fix. There's no instant adjustment, like when your back goes out and you want to just go to the chiropractor so they can just snap you back into position. None of that exists. There's no quick fixes on this planet, and anything that is sold to you that way it's just snake oil. And even just for myself, appreciating that I may never see the fulfillment of the vision that I have for a new earth or a new society of humans and how we can operate together. But if I'm at least, if I take my last breath and we're closer than we were when I was here, that's really the goal. And that's not an easy thing for me to embrace every day, because there's definitely the part of me that was raised with a colonized mindset, from this long-standing tradition of imperialism and capitalism and the pursuit of advancing myself by any means necessary. We all are contending with that in different ways, but I don't think there's as many excuses anymore. You know, it's one thing to just be gentle with myself and acknowledge where I've come from, but I can't claim ignorance anymore. There's too much information out there. There's too many opportunities to challenge myself to be better, to be different.
Yeah, Eric, you said it earlier about we're planting a forest that we'll never see, that we'll never walk through. I think is what you said. And I know there's Native American teachings that say, like, a lot of the Iroquois Federation that talked about making their decisions based on the next 7 generations, which I think is your great-grandkids. And yeah, I do. Again, there's this. Well, okay, I'll say it this way. So, the same men that looked out in nature and saw all the potential, right, basically made the world around us, right? They looked out at the same hills and the same landscapes that we're looking at now, and they saw a vision of our cities and towns and technologies and everything that we've built with the dirt of the earth. And, for a time it was a great ride. And it's kind of coming to, it's clear that it's coming to an end. And so we need to be looking at these same landscapes and envision, like, well, what else, the potential? Like, what else can we do with all this? And how can we create systems and cultures and values and technologies and communities with the same dirt that actually are more sustainable and more, just more integrative to living in proper relationship on the earth, like every other species does, except for us.
Yeah, I mean, if we even go back to as far as before humans had verbal language, I'd like to imagine that those ancestors were still in their own way praying for, in a lot of ways, the life that we get to live here, right? Not having to worry about where my food, water, and shelter comes from. Holy cow, that's incredible. I don't imagine that they foresaw at what cost that really meant. And in a lot of ways, I don't think that a lot of humanity still realizes what that actual cost is. We're still kind of just free falling off of a cliff thinking we're flying.
Agreed. Well, final thoughts, man, before we wrap it up here? Anything else that wants to be said?
Plug. Speaking of getting out in nature and just listening, the November 2022 First Nature episode is outdoor meditation of just that thing. So if you've never, if you want to just a template about how to go and do that, you can check that out next month.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe just from you two guys who came in fresh to Rising Man and seeing where you are now and arrived at the station that you're in with where you see yourselves going, any words of encouragement or thoughts that you want to communicate to the guys listening?
Yeah, you touched on this a little bit, and it's still a painful truth for me to swallow, but there is no quick fix. Having a vision and moving towards it in a progressive daily way has been the thing that has got me out of bed in the morning. And that's not to say that that's easy and that I want to get out of bed every morning, but knowing that I'm moving forward in a direction that I feel truly in integrity with people that I love and trust, has made all the difference.
Yeah, for myself, building community, and while building that community, setting a goal that you'll never reach, right? But it's, like you're just on the journey of creating, the vision, and the goal will be reached by another generation, right? It's not for me to see the end piece, because it's the long game, right? Your children are going to continue on. My nephews are going to continue on building this thing, this new earth, because we'll never see it. It's planting that forest that we'll never get to hang out in the shade of, but knowing that the others will get to enjoy it at some point, and there will be fruit to bear and other resources that will be more abundant and more sustainable.
I think you said it really well, and the one thing that brought back to me, and something that is always a beautiful reminder, is like, have fun too.
Yeah,
it's gotta be fun. And just sitting around this fire and chatting with you guys has been a testament to that, because we do a lot of really hard and serious work out there, and we've got to, if we want to create the visions that we're holding. And if it isn't fun, what's the point?
yeah.
Well said. Well, it's just about that time. Signing off here from beautiful Death Valley as we say goodbye to the sun for a final day. It's really nice sitting around this fire and getting a little smoked out for a few moments, but really nice to drop in and have this conversation with you guys. Thanks for your contributions. And yeah, thank you guys, not just for your words, but really the energy that you stoke this greater flame of Rising Man with. It's seen, it's appreciated, and there's no way that we'd be anywhere close to where we are right now without guys like you.